you realize that in India over the past 3-4 years, there is set in a culture or momentum of manufactured dissent. The riots happen and then suddenly, as if by magic, they cease to happen. Agitations start at the drop of a hat. There is a lot of arson, there is bloodshed, there is murder, there is rioting, there is vandalism, and suddenly that so-called movement stops. This has happened time and again, and it has happened so many times that people have started seeing a pattern in all this. And there is a saying, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence. And if it happens for the third time, it is enemy action. Hello, I'm Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching Checkmate. Today, I'm going to discuss 5 agitations that have happened in the past few years. There are many more that have happened, but I'm going to talk only about 5 of them. And I will tell you how they started, how they finished. And you would be hard-pressed, my friend, to find logic behind it. Let us start with the CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act.
मैं आज भी कहना चाहता हूं देश भर के मुसलमान भाइयों बहनों को कि ये गलत अफवाहें फैलाई जा रही है। सीएए किसी की नागरिकता लेने का कानून है ही नहीं, सीएए नागरिकता देने का।
This was said to be anti-Indian Muslim. The fact that it had nothing to do with Indian Muslims at all escaped everybody. This act was brought in by the government of India to help non-Muslim minorities in Bangladesh, Afghanistan and Pakistan, all 3 of which incidentally are declared Islamic countries. But then Shaheen Bagh happened. It was in the Republic TV studios long back, before this agitation started, that I met Tariq Fateh, a renowned political commentator. And he told me that they will block passages to your house, they will block roads in front of your house. And you are not going to be able to do anything. And I remember telling Mr. Tariq Fateh that, no, Mr. Fateh, there is a constitution in India. There is law and order. And he smiled at me and he said, no, Gaurav, this will happen. Mark my words. I said, who are they? Do you mean the Muslims of India? He said, no. I mean anybody who seeks to do harm to India. He can be a man or a woman of any religion or persuasion. Then after a few years, Shaheen Bagh happened. And I called up Tariq Fateh and I told him that what he had said had come true. Just imagine, rioting happened in Delhi right after Shaheen Bagh. But within 48 hours of Donald Trump flying back to the United States of America, there was no Shaheen Bagh. Has the government rolled back the CAA? Absolutely not. But why are there no more protests? Shaheen Bagh was a massive sit-in right at the border of Uttar Pradesh and Delhi. I remember I was taking my father to All India Institute of Medical Science. From my house, the distance is hardly 35 to 40 minutes. That day, it took me 2.5 hours. This is something that I can never forget. People sitting in Delhi, blocking all arterial routes and telling the nation that we will do it from here. We will block your roads. We will disrupt your entire lifestyle and there is nothing that you can do about it. The score: truth 0, propaganda 1. Then the farm laws. There were 3 farm laws, essentially meant to empower farmers. Now what happened to the farm laws? What happened was that out of 28 states and 8 union territories, each of them having their own farming population. I mean, there is farming happening in Ladakh. There is farming happening in Kerala, in Manipur, in Gujarat. In every single every single state or union territory in India, there is farming happening. But the agitations happened only in Punjab, Haryana, and largely Western UP. Are there no farmers in West Bengal? Are there no farmers in Kerala? Haven't you heard of farmers in Maharashtra or the apple orchards of Kashmir? There was no agitation anywhere in the country. But vested interests from these states forced the government to roll back the farm laws. Later on, it was said that more than 80% of the farmers wanted the farm laws to happen because they thought that it would be greatly advantageous to them and help them in doubling their income, but that did not happen. Truth took a hit. The Indian government was largely painted to be anti-farmer. Truth died that day. And here is the score. Truth 0, propaganda 2. Now, about the hijab row. I asked a Muslim friend from Pakistan, is hijab mandatory in Islam? And he said yes. I asked him, if that be so, all these Pakistani anchors on television, on Pakistan primetime television, who do not appear in front of TV with a hijab, they keep their heads bare. Are they non-Muslims? And he said, no, they're Muslims. I again asked him, is hijab mandatory in Islam? He had no answer to give. And that is what surprises me. My concern is not the hijab, it's a personal matter or a religious matter with the Muslims. It does not concern me at all. My problem is that the hijab controversy erupted in our faces. It floated around there for 3 or 4 weeks, and then suddenly one day, hijab wasn't a political issue at all. It died a natural death, but not before. Long editorials were written in national and international papers, and how India had taken away the rights of Muslims to practice their religion. Surprising, isn't it? But this is exactly what happened. Do you hear about the hijab row today? Have all the Muslim women stopped wearing hijab? Or has every single Muslim woman started wearing the hijab? To compare it with the Sikh turban is wrong. The turban is one of the 5 tenets of Sikhism. Hijab is not one of the tenets of Islam. My simple question to my Pakistani friend was, is it mandatory or is it not mandatory? Because if it is, then I stand with my brothers and sisters and say that yes, they have every right to wear hijab inside the parliament, inside the classroom, inside flights, inside every single private or public space. But if it is not mandatory in Islam, if it is not mandated by the Holy Quran, then why should you create such a political problem out of thin air? Has the problem of hijab been resolved today? Is everybody wearing the hijab? Or has everybody stopped wearing the hijab? No, the situation is the same as before. But vested interests ensured that there was a problem, that India was shown in a bad light. And here is the score. Let me read out the score to you. Truth 0, propaganda 3. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you remember the Namaz row in Gurgaon? The Namaz row in Gurgaon happened largely because there were a lot of Muslims who said that they had no space, they had no place to offer namaz, especially on Friday. Now the thing is, Haryana has over 4,000 masjids. Gurgaon has over 100. But that is not my point. That is not my point. Whether Muslims read the namaz on the road or in public parks or inside masjids or inside their offices is a debate for another day. The point that I'm trying to bring out is something totally different. The point that I'm trying to bring out here today is this. Has the namaz row been effectively dealt with? Is there a problem of Muslims in Gurgaon offering namaz today? Has the situation changed from 6 months back? If not, why no protests? Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to tell you is that these protests come out of thin air. They come out of thin air and they dissipate. They just go away. They simply vanish. Whether it's the farm law, hijab, namaz, or any of those things that I mentioned, they appear out of thin air. And foreign media, certain vested interests in our own national media in India, NGOs, foreign powers, they all take advantage and try to sully the image of India. And this is something that has been happening constantly over a period of time. This is not a one-off. This happens very frequently. Now the latest, and before I go to the latest, let me tell you the score. Truth 0, propaganda 4. Truth 0, propaganda 4. Now, the latest scheme to have caught the country's imagination is Agnipath. Now, people who oppose Agnipath have valid points. They have valid points. And then the armed forces too have valid points. And I'll tell you where this entire debate upon Agnipath starts. Now, there are two parts to it. One part is the person who is going to be affected because he has spent his life dreaming about joining the armed forces, has exercised, has prepared for written examinations, and this person is totally motivated. He's probably a youngster in some village in India or some small town in India or even a metropolitan city in India who spends the early morning exercising that one day there is going to be the so-called Bharti of the Indian Army. He will go and he will get through, and this will give him a life that enables him to serve his country and gives him a stable government job. Now this is from the point of view of the would-be recruit, the youngster, 16, 17, 18, 19 years of age. Of course, he's going to join the army when he's 18 or 17 and a half. But they start preparing from before. Then there is the other part, the army. The army says that we need, or the Air Force or the Navy, that we need the Agnipath scheme simply because we need the age profile of the Indian Army to go down. It's currently 32 or 33. And they're saying in today's day and age, it is not acceptable. Now, there are various arguments against and for. One of the arguments against Agnipath is, what will the person do after 4 years? What will the person do after 4 years? And, the government has come out with schemes with reservations saying that they will be sidestepped into CAPFs, they will be absorbed in police forces, etc. And there are so many other schemes that are coming up. MOD, Ministry of Defense, has come up with a scheme. Ministry of Home Affairs has come up with a scheme. So all these things are happening as we speak, right? But from the point of view of the Indian Armed Forces, pension is also an issue. Pension is an issue because they say that the pensions are now 125. The ratio is 100 to 125 salaries versus pensions. And they're saying that this model is not sustainable. The counter argument is, don't politicians get a pension? If a person is an MLA, he becomes a member of parliament and then he becomes a governor, he gets pension for all three. In most of the states, the rule is that if you become MLA 3 times, 4, 5 or 6 times, you get 6 pensions. And they're incrementally added. Now, this is a drain upon the exchequer. But more than that, it's not about the money that I'm talking about. It's ethically and morally wrong. You cannot tell the armed forces that you will not give a pension, but we will continue to get pensions. That doesn't fly. So this is another argument against the Agnipath scheme. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people have come up and said that operationally it is robust and this is what the Indian Army wants. Now let us separate Indian Army from politics. What the politicians get as pension, that can be my personal opinion. But it should not for a moment weigh upon what the armed forces decide for their own people. Trains are being burnt. Till very recently, railway stations were vandalized. And a lot of people were hurt, they were injured, lots of lives spoiled. The police filed FIRs. There are young people in prison, and rightly so. Rightly so. Anybody who damages public property deserves to be in prison. But the fact of the matter is, why did it all start? And suddenly, as of today, the media has moved on to much juicier news. It could be Maharashtra. It could be the presidential elections. Suddenly, Agnipath is not the flavor of the season. And why does this happen? Is the media to blame? I don't think so. News channels will follow news. The very construct, the very nature of news channels is to follow news. And since news channels have decided to move ahead, which means that Agnipath, as an agitation, is dying down. The veteran community is divided right down the center. Some veterans feel that Agnipath is good, some veterans feel it's bad. I feel Let's take a middle path. Let's figure out whether it's good or bad. We don't know. You and I, my viewers, we don't know if Agnipath is good or bad. Maybe we'll come to know after 3-4 years. It is still work in progress. And everything cannot be decided on day one. Anybody who expects that the government knows everything and the government should have thought of this earlier, no, it doesn't work like that. Let's be logical about it. But at the same time, valid concerns have been raised against the Agnipath scheme. But this is not what I'm here to tell you. I'm saying that so much of bad press has been given to Agnipath and everybody seems to be riding the gravy train. Everybody has an opinion. And in the end, it is India that ends up looking bad because the foreign media has picked it up. India has become the hub of agitation. It has become the hub of rioting, of arson. Is this certain parties being sullen because they aren't able to win elections? It very well may be. Is there a foreign conspiracy? We certainly can't rule out that angle. I'm not sure, but I'm not willing to rule it out as yet. Is there a group of people of vested interest in India which want the situation to be permanently unsettled, if I may put it that way? Seems very likely. But one thing is clear, the government needs to brush up on its strategic communication capabilities, which I feel are sadly lacking. Every time there is misinformation, we see that the ministry involved does not have an answer. It's always playing catch up. There is something called a preemptive strike. For example, the farm laws. What could have been done was a strategic communication cell could have been formed by the government, and it could have prepared videos, informative videos, through credible sources for the media and social media. There could have been extensive briefings. Farm leaders could have been taken on board. Everything which have made this entire thing so much easier for India, because farm laws, I believe, are good for India. Unfortunately, they've been rolled back. Similarly for Agnipath. If the Army Chief, Navy Chief and the Air Chief believe that Agnipath is good for India, it should have been communicated in a manner befitting such a major scheme. Agnipath is groundbreaking in the sense that it will change the course of the armed forces forever. There were legacy systems in play in the armed forces. They will change. The way Bharti takes place, the way thousands and hundreds of thousands of young men hang on to trains and buses to get enrolled in the army, that will change. The systems have gone online. There is so much of change happening. I don't know, for one, if it's good or bad. I'm not willing to bet on it. All I'm willing to say is there seems to be a lack of communication. Now, here is what the government should ideally do. Have a strategic communication cell in place. 5-7 people representing the government. And they should decide how a certain policy can be explained to the people of India and to a global audience. How should they take global media and national media on board? How should they manage social media? It's important for us to understand as Indians that every scheme that the government launches may not be absolutely good or absolutely bad. The problem is with disinformation. If you say that Agnipath will totally destroy the armed forces, I don't think that's a very mature statement to make. Or if you say that Agnipath will make the Indian armed forces the number one armed forces in the world, even that is an immature statement to make. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. We don't know. We'll only come to know as time passes by. However, coming back to the problem of strategic communication, the way it is rolled out, the way it is explained to the people, the way sometimes government departments are seen scrambling for cover because there is such major public backlash, whether synthetically manufactured or genuine, is something that leaves much to be desired. The Agnipath scheme was something that the armed forces thought they needed. As I mentioned before, to lower the age profile of the army and to save on the pension bill, which we've already discussed. I spoke to General Raj Shukla, who was GOC-in-C R-Track, and he told me that it was the Indian Army at R-Track in Shimla who thought through this entire thing. How will the Agniveers get trained? How will they get absorbed in the army? There was an entire process. It wasn't done at the drop of a hat. It wasn't done overnight. They took 1.5, 2 years to think through everything. And this has been in the works for a long time. I also want to tell people something. A lot of people have asked me, they've written to me saying that, Major, shouldn't there be a scheme like this even for officers? Why is the government harassing only poor Jawans? I'd like to tell them, of course, I agree with you. But have you heard of emergency commissioned officers? Have you heard of short service commissioned officers? I'm one right in front of you. I served for 5.5 years in the army. I don't get a pension. No short service officer gets a pension. During our time, they served for 5 plus 5 years. Some of them were absorbed in the army. Today, they serve for 10 years plus 4 years. Some of them are absorbed in the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. But without exception, no one gets a pension. We don't get any benefits from the army, except for 1 or 2 minor benefits. The problem is that we must understand why Agnipath was launched. And more than that, we must understand why public arson? Why public arson? Who are these bunch of people who are burning railway stations? And why is it happening in India? Time and again. Who instigated the farmers to go up to Red Fort? How did the Khalistanis manage to hijack the farm laws agitation? What happened in Shaheen Bagh? Why did Shaheen Bagh finish overnight? Why did it just disappear like snowflakes in midsummer? It's very surprising. As I mentioned before, President Trump flies out and within 48 hours, there is nobody at Shaheen Bagh. Was it all done because the US president was coming to India? Was it done to show India in a bad light? What about the Hijab row? What about the Namaz row? Were these manufactured to show India in a bad light? And why did they just disappear overnight? Why isn't anybody talking about the Namaz row in Gurgaon any longer? Why is there no problem with the hijab in Karnataka? Why is there no problem at all? And today, my friends, because of a lack of strategic communication, I'm telling you today that very soon, next month, you're going to see another agitation. Next month, you're going to see again vandals coming out and destroying public property, disrupting our normal lives, and this will go on and on unless we figure out what exactly is the reason, why is it happening, and what are the best ways to counter it. I'd like to tell you that strategic communication is an area in which I think the government lacks. I think the government needs to really work on strategic communication. If you have a bunch of laws, if you have something that you need communicated to the public, it should be done with advanced preparations. For example, if you have farm laws that are being discussed in Parliament, if you have farm laws that you wish to roll out, what are the pros and cons? It should have been explained to the people in the language they understand. Simply tweeting about farm laws will not help. Most farmers are not on Twitter. They have to be explained in the language they understand through videos, through newspapers, through various things, through social media platforms. This is how you convince people. Communication is a strategy, and strategic communication is an asset in any country's arsenal. Unfortunately, in India, it has been seriously lacking, which is why, very sadly and with a very, very heavy heart today, I predict that in 1.5, 2 months, you're again going to see an agitation. You're going to see a dharna. You may, God forbid, may not see violence, but you'll see a normal life disrupted, and this will carry on and on. I'm not ruling out conspiracy. I'm not ruling out special interest. All I'm saying is that this has happened so many times that it just can't be a mere coincidence. As I quoted before, this is definitely enemy action. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you again next week. Till then, have a great weekend.